Okay, so I only have two big stories for today, and that's kind of unusual. Generally, I try to do three big stories, and sometimes it expands. But the two big stories are this. One, there was a drone attack in the Dagestan region in the Caspian Sea. It was on the Russian Navy flotilla. And this is a pretty significant thing because this is 1,000 kilometers away from Ukraine, and it's just amazing that they were able to hit it. Now, I don't think that they did a lot of damage. In fact, I was watching Suchomimus. He was saying the drones that they had might not have had the ability to penetrate those ships' armor or whatever. But let's hear just a little bit of what Suchomimus has to
Yes,
say
were
about this.
evacuated to the Caspian Sea for protection. Here's the location zoomed out, nearly 1,000 kilometers
Now,
to the
if you
front
didn't
line.
hear what he just said, they were evacuated from the Black Sea to the Caspian Sea. There's like a some kind of artery going through here for protection against Ukraine. Like, that's the amazing thing. And this is the distance just by as the crow flies from it. It's just remarkable.
Lines, so a very sizable distance and a bit of a failure on Russian air defence's part here, which
Hmm.
should come as no surprise. Now, I am curious that in the videos we saw no sign of SAM activity, just a lot of small arms fire. And
Yeah, he
credit to
talked
the
about
gunners
they
here.
were trying to hit it with small arms fire. And I have this video here. I'll link this video below, but I'm not going to play it because you can hear the shooting in the background. But yeah, as that thing's coming in, they're shooting it with like rifles. And yeah, I mean, it was pretty amazing to see. Um, Jane Kiev said Ukraine was obliterating Russian oil refineries and at other key targets on almost a daily basis until a month before the U.S. election. Then, hours after the results, a resumption with Ukraine hitting naval targets 1,000 kilometers from Russia, and that's exactly what happened. Okay, and there's some videos here about like this guy's running away from what's about to explode, and here's what it looked like with the hit, and it's just wow. Okay, so that was before the election. Here's the election. Now, what you're seeing here is a map that never actually came true. You'll see the swing states are Arizona, Nevada, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, and Georgia. Those are the swing states that I've been showing you. And this guy, on election day, just before the election took place, said Trump isn't going to lose. He's going to be humiliated in a blowout, and then his life will belong to Jack Smith, 319 to 219. So it didn't happen that way. Now let's look at what did happen. So here's actually the actual results so far, and I stress so far. Harris only has 224 to Trump's 277. Now you only need 270 to pass, but these swing states have not even reported. So Pennsylvania was one, and I said if Pennsylvania wins, so goes the nation, right? Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania. Now, Michigan could still look at the numbers 49 to 48. It's not quite reported yet, it's not quite called. Still could go for Trump. Nevada 51 to 46 is probably going to go for Trump. Arizona 52 to 47 could still go for Trump. Alaska, well, we know Alaska's going to go for Trump. That always goes Republican. It looks like Trump will have won every swing state. Like the margins were very small, and we couldn't call it before. But Trump, it appears, will have won every swing state in this election. So the blowout that was this is he's not going to lose, he's going to be humiliated. It actually looks like it's going the other direction. So what happened? Like, how did people get it so wrong? Part of this is we have to listen to different sources and we have to triangulate. Now, I'm a conservative, but I've not been like pro Trump, go Trump, because I think he's actually kind of a bad thing for the Republican Party, and he's not that great for Ukraine. He's a wild card. Harris's statements were far better for Ukraine. This is a one-issue channel, and I've not been rooting for him in any way. In fact, I was looking forward to yesterday, like I would look forward to a colonoscopy. Like, oh no, here it comes. Let's get it over with, right? A lot of people got it wrong, and we have to ask why. Vlad Vexler said, look, I'm biased. I've said in public for years that Trump victory is the default expectation, but still, dare I say, it's not good enough for people who were certain of a Harris victory to just say, I was wrong. It stems from not understanding how people could vote for Trump. I think that's a very fair thing. That's been my observation. People just don't understand the Republicans who are supporting him. Now, I'm not one of those type of Republicans. I'm a Reagan Republican that's in a kind of a different position than the MAGA types, but I think I understand why they do what they do. Sean Johnson's a CEO. He said, I voted for her. I think he's a bad guy. But if you lose the Senate, the House, Electoral College, and popular vote, and you think the lesson is that half the country is racist, sexist, homophobic, transphobic, and stupid, it's the wrong lesson. And the same thing will likely happen again in 2028. So he's at least saying, we can't just write them off. We have to understand what's going on. And I think that's a very fair statement. Jason J. Smart says Ukraine supporters, most of us are not happy about how the U.S. elections turned out. But it is the reality, and it helps no one to whine about it. Rather, we must embrace the facts and plan our next steps. I think that's fair. That's what we ought to be doing. We'll be doing that in the coming days. Now, yesterday I showed this to my wife as we were watching the election results, and these arrows, all the red arrows are pointing up to the right toward Trump, and all the blue arrows are pointing toward Biden. And so what's happening here is the direction of the country is really shifted. But when I saw on the news that 70% felt we're on the wrong track, 30% felt we're on the right track, and then I saw this. 63% of those who felt that they are falling behind financially voted Trump, 34% voted for Harris. I think that tells you pretty much everything you need to know about the election. Now, this one I saw on MSNBC. Look at the percentage of those who felt that foreign policy was the most important issue. It's only 4%. So while I feel very strongly about foreign policy in Ukraine, most voters weren't looking at that. And so that's explanatory of what was happening. Now, beyond this, let's look at CNN here. The Dow surged. The stock market surged 1,300 points as Trump was reelected. Look at this. I mean, this is the Dow Jones Industrial Average jumped, huge jump. Look at this. Look, I mean, just wow. Now, I talked about this yesterday in this video that almost nobody watched about why Americans were going to vote the way that they were going to vote, and we need to understand why they did what they did. Okay, so I think Zelensky said the right tone, saying, I appreciate President Trump's commitment to peace through strength approach in global affairs. This is exactly the principle that can practically bring just peace to Ukraine closer. We look forward to an era of a strong United States of America under President Trump's decisive leadership. We rely on continued strong bipartisan support for Ukraine in the United States. And then Keir Starmer added, talking about as the closest of allies, we stand shoulder to shoulder with our defense and shared values of freedom, democracy, and enterprise, congratulating Trump as well. Anton Gerashenko pointed this out. I thought this was really interesting. Medvedev was one of the first Russian officials to comment on the results of the U.S. elections, but it's not what you think. So listen to this. The question is how much they'll make Trump pay for the war. He's stubborn, but the system is stronger. I think he's right. Trump is, from his statements, was not the best choice just from his verbal statements, but he is a wild card, and it's yet to see what he's going to do. And then Anton Gerashenko talked about this. The Russian Foreign Ministry said in an official statement that the running political elite in the U.S. adheres to anti-Russian attitudes. Here's a partial translation of the statement. We do not harbor illusions about the elected American president, who is well known in Russia, and the new composition of Congress, where Republicans, according to the preliminary data, prevail. The ruling political elite in the United States, regardless of party affiliation, adheres to anti-Russian attitudes and the line of containment of Moscow. This line is not subject to fluctuations in the U.S. domestic political barometer, whether it's about America First, as interpreted by Donald Trump and his supporters, or about the rules-based world order Democrats are fixated on. So, like, the Russians are actually aware that it might not just go that well. Now I understand that a lot of you think that Trump is just Putin's lackey and he's going to do whatever Putin wants. I'm not sure that that's the case. Now, I could be wrong, but it turns out a lot of other people were wrong as well. So we need to have some humility as we approach this. Mark Rutte, the NATO Secretary General, said, I just congratulated real Donald Trump on his election as President of the United States. His leadership will again be key to keeping our alliance strong. I look forward to working with him again to advance peace through strength. Remember, you just heard that same line, peace through strength? Now, all NATO countries are going to have to supply their 2%, maybe even more as they move forward. This is Ukrainian MP Oleksiy Goncharenko. He said he does, quote, this about Trump, he doesn't want to be a loser. He doesn't want to receive his own Afghanistan like Biden received in the beginning of his term, unquote. Donald Trump in the White House means, quote, higher risks but higher possibilities for the war in Ukraine. I think that's a very fair statement, that it is high risk. Like, we don't know exactly what he's going to do, but compared to what Biden has slow walked, it also could turn out possibly to work out well for them. We just don't know yet. Jay in Kiev says that Biden's legacy will be that he willingly handed the free world over to a coalition of Russia, North Korea, Iran, and China. I think that's kind of what he did by just being too cautious. Michael McFaul says, congratulations at real Donald Trump. Well, that's good of Michael McFaul for saying that. But McFaul has also been calling Trump a fascist and a dictator for the last month. Now, I appreciate McFaul for his support for Ukraine, but we have three possibilities here. Either Donald Trump is a dictator and a fascist, in which case you need to stop him at all costs, right? Or this was all hyperbolic election-related rhetoric, and it just gets out of control, and we all know it's hyperbolic, or it's just false, and he's not a fascist. So it's one of those three possibilities, and we're going to see in coming days which it is. For those of you who said this is the last election in my lifetime, I, I mean, I don't see that. The institutions in the United States are some of the strongest in the world, and this won't be the last election in your lifetime. Kyiv Post says Biden failed Ukraine, signaling the exact weakness that Putin needed. So who will stop Russia? Now, it's a real crapshoot when you're saying, well, Trump's there. Okay, based on his statements, it doesn't inspire confidence, but it's yet to be determined what Trump will do. Now, bracing against these possibilities, Sikorski, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Poland, believes that after the presidential elections in the U.S., Europe should immediately assume greater responsibility for its security, and Poland will be a leader in increasing the stability of the EU. That's fair, that's fine, that's exactly what they should do, and Trump can go along with that. He wants Europeans to take more responsibility for European security. So I think there's a way that they can actually work together in some meaningful ways if that takes place. And for those of you that were like laughing at Macron along the way, I saw this. Despite all the criticism Macron received, including some he rightly deserves, it's interesting to see the same people who spent months trashing everything Macron said suddenly having a wake-up call and calling for strategic autonomy. I mean, there is that. If you even watch the Russian propagandist on Russian state TV, they are seeing some things that maybe you weren't even paying attention to about what Trump is and what Trump might do. So let's listen to this. Do I understand correctly that you support Donald Trump again? Yes, there's not even a doubt. I said it 10 times already, even though he sometimes says something against communists, something like this, to put it politely, against the left, against the communists. I'll make this short so I don't interrupt you further. Earlier, Donald Trump said that he was the man who destroyed Nord Stream, that he was the man who could defeat Vladimir Putin, that he, Donald Trump, was the man who could achieve the strategic defeat of the Russian Federation, and his historic statement that he was the politician who has imposed the most anti-Russian sanctions. Well, he didn't impose the most, of course. We still have 20,000 plus sanctions imposed upon us. Is there anything else to impose? Well, you see, you hear what you want from his speeches. Whoa, did you hear that? Well, you see, you hear what you want from his speeches. If you're so inclined to see that he's just going to be Putin's pet, you're seeing that. And if you're so inclined to see, like, you know, he is saying these other things, and that's what many MAGA voters who were also pro-Ukraine were seeing, you hear what you want. Now, the trick is to not just hear what you want, but to actually try to incorporate all the data and see what's actually going to be. And I'll tell you, it is just foggy to figure out what's going on. It's just difficult. Okay, so right now, President Trump has won. He has beaten Harris, and he might even win all 7 of the swing states. The Senate, the U.S. Senate, has flipped and turned Republican. That's not necessarily a bad thing because the Republicans in the Senate tend to, more than not, work with the Democrats about Ukraine. So that's not necessarily a bad thing. The House is what you have to worry about. 200 Republicans in the House so far, 185, 218 for the majority. Now, this is going to sound heretical to my Republican friends, but you actually don't want a scenario where one party has the presidency and the Senate and the House. Because what happens there is that whichever party is dominant tends to overplay their hand, and then they lose the House by a big margin. It's actually better if they have divided government where, say, the House is by a small majority in Democrat hands and the Senate is by a small majority in Republican hands. And then they have to negotiate and cooperate and get along. And that may very well be what happens. If not, the failsafe for the Democrats is that in the Senate, the rules are such that you need 60 to pass any legislation, and so they still have to negotiate. Okay, Jessica Berlin says, time for Joe Biden to become the least lame duck in history. Whatever can go to Ukraine needs to go now. Now, I'm not optimistic that that's going to happen. Everything Joe Biden has done has showed us that he has a knee-jerk reaction to escalating. I don't think he was just waiting for the election to then pour it on in Ukraine. I think he's sincerely worried about escalating and provoking Putin, and I think that's a tragic miscalculation. And we have to realize that we either have been or could be wrong. And if we're humble enough, we listen to the other side. And that's why I appreciate you and my audience so much, because I know 2/3 of you are on the left side of the political spectrum and you don't see things like I necessarily see things. I'm just trying to interpret the right to provide context so that you can understand what's happening in the war in Ukraine. And in this instance, what's happening with the election of Trump. I'll leave you with one last map, and that is this: the legality of owning a kangaroo in the United States. If you're in a red state, you can't own a kangaroo. If you're in an orange state, you can own it with a permit. And in those green states, you don't even need a permit to own a kangaroo. All right, my friends, just trying to leave you with something jovial. Keep calm, carry on, and tonight, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, I'm going to do a post-election live stream. Come bring your questions. I'll answer everything I can. Again, I'm just trying to help you understand how the American population was thinking as they voted for Donald Trump. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, the subscribes, and thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.